Well, greetings to you. This is a little bit of a follow-up on my last video. I'm now just going to sort of go into a little bit of detail on how we can broker a peace. Okay, it's kicked off. It started, and I've devoted a great deal of my life to the Great War, studying the Great War, as indeed have many other historians, and wondering how in 1914 it came to a conflict between Austria and Serbia, the other side of Europe, and ended up with 1 million British Empire War dead and 2 million maimed, and a global conflagration. How did that happen? What kind of stupidity brought that about? How did it get out of control? And I'm smelling the wind a bit here at the moment. It seems to be a little bit the same here. I'm getting the deja vu of 1914, and it can be stopped. It didn't have to get to where we are, but we are where we are, and we have to take it from here. And how can we negotiate a peace? Because everybody watching this clip, and me, whether people agree with me or not, all want one thing, and we want peace. Because we all know, with the exception of some of the neocons in Washington, of course, we all know war is bad. Nobody wins a war, apart from those people, of course, who are heavily financially involved in going to war. And of course, there are plenty of those. Let's have a look at what we can do and what we can do immediately. Something that we don't need to wait for. Let's line up a negotiating team, okay? Let's change the General Secretary of NATO. Jens Stoltenberg has to go. He's one of the architects of this war because of his foghorn diplomacy and arrogant stupidity. Let's get shot of him. He's utterly hopeless. Let's mute the Washington neocons who want war with somebody, and doesn't it go on? Oh dear, doesn't it go on? War all over the planet all the time since Korea. It's not Vietnam, it's Syria, oh dear, I've gone down this route before. Let's get rid of those people because they're no help. Now, what can we do? What would Russia accept as a deal? What would the Ukraine accept as a deal? Because anything is better than this war, because war just kills people and uses up money and nobody ever gets anywhere at the end of the day. Let's have a look at this, shall we? First of all, the Ukraine has to lose its constitution and rejudge its constitution, because its constitution is part of the problem. They are wanting the Crimea to come back as part of the Ukraine, and the Crimean people don't want that. They've already had a plebiscite. They want to remain under the wing of the Russian Federation. But okay, here's something that we can offer the Ukraine. Let's have an independently monitored plebiscite again in the Ukraine to see what the people actually want and leave it to the people. And if it's again overwhelming in favour of coming under the wing of the Russian Federation, the Ukrainians are just going to have to accept it whether they like it or not. And it'll be independently monitored. And I think that would be a good first step. Then we can look at the constant harassment that the Russians in the eastern Ukraine have had to suffer, and do something about that. And I would suggest more observers then in the eastern Ukraine to monitor that situation, which has been going on for about 14 years. So that needs to be monitored. And then we can say to the Russians, look, if we've cleared up the constitutional problem, if the European Union said we are going to offer a free trade deal to the Ukraine, but they can't have official membership, which is the situation at the moment, incidentally, so there's no change needed there. We will not accept them into NATO, because NATO then will see it as a base for missiles and boots on the ground, all the rest of it that goes with NATO, which we've seen in Poland, we've seen in the Baltic states, and we've seen in Romania. We're going to get rid of that because that's one of the Russian things. The Russians aren't going to go away until they've got that established. Now, if we can establish that, there's a basis for peace. And that means the Russians can completely withdraw, because what we have is not a constitutionally hostile Ukraine, a demilitarized zone, and of course, don't forget there's 1,000 kilometers of border between Russia and the Ukraine, and they feel themselves threatened and surrounded, and I rather pointed that out in my last video. So that would be a very good basis for a discussion with people who actually understand diplomacy on both sides. At the moment, we don't have that. We don't have that. We have rhetoric, we have propaganda, we seem to be being led by the editorials of the Daily Mail and the Daily Express. That isn't going to get us anywhere. So let's calm down and have that relationship. Now let me talk about sanctions. We're now talking about sanctions. Now, this is a game the West simply can't win. We can't win this. We know sanctions don't work. Have a look at the United States, the biggest military power in history, probably the biggest financial power in history. Sanctions for decades and decades and decades against Cuba, which is just off their coast. And all that ensured was that Cuba remained under Castro for over 30 years. Absolutely ridiculous. Sanctions don't work. We know that. We know they don't work. What's the best thing that works is trade. And Frederick Bastiat, the great French economic philosopher, pointed that out. He said, if trade crosses borders, armies don't. So let's trade. So this is not the time to try and curtail trade. It's time to set the deal for more trade. Now, if we're going to sanction Russia, let's see what the game plan is. Let's just look at some of the numbers. The Russians have a debt to GDP ratio of about 20-25%. The West, Western Europe and America, it's somewhere 4 or 5 times that. So we're not in a strong position. We are deeply in debt and the Russians aren't. What have the Russians got to sell? They've got wheat, they've got gas, they've got oil, they've got all the things that the West needs and is dependent upon. Stupidly, and I warned of this in the European Parliamentary Chamber years ago, we are holding ourselves hostage to Russia by relying on all this energy from them instead of creating our own. But no, the Greenies didn't like that. So there's no fracking, there's no nuclear, there's no fossil fuels. And so now we're dependent on Russia. Well, that wasn't very clever, was it? And I said this years ago, but nobody would listen. Nobody would listen. Now we are hostage. And of course, they've got stuff that we need to buy. We've got stuff that they don't need to buy. They can get away without buying Mercedes, BMWs and all the rest of it, and Jaguars and Bentley. They can get away without all that. They can get away with all that. They've got stuff we have to have. That we've got stuff that they think is nice to have. Plus the fact, of course, they can sell it elsewhere. They've got a very saleable commodities. You know, wheat and barley and gas and oil is very saleable globally. They don't have to sell it to us. And of course, the trade with the European Union is round about 58 billion. Russia's about the 6th, 7th biggest trading partner of the European Union. So who's this going to affect? It could destabilise the ECB, it could destabilise the euro, which was already destabilised. The banks are already bankrupt. Central banks are already insolvent. Nobody gets a win, okay? Nobody gets a win. And of course, you see prices of food will go up. Prices of gasoline will go up. All these prices will go up. Now, who suffers? Who suffers with this, all right? Do you think Boris Johnson or Macron or Trudeau or Biden really care if energy prices go up, their houses are heated, they don't care what the price of gasoline is? But you do. You do, the little people do. If you're on the fixed wage or you're not earning very much money, these things are very important to you. The big people in the game, the celebrities in the game, the people with the propaganda who own the newspapers, all these people don't care if the price of energy doubles because they're so rich it doesn't make any difference to them. It's only the little people that suffer on both sides of the argument. Both sides, it's Europe and everybody, the little people suffer, the big fat cats don't suffer. So this kind of hostility isn't getting anywhere because it doesn't cut the mustard with anybody because it's not affecting them. So sanctions don't work. Let's have a look at this crazy idea that suddenly you can confiscate the wealth of anybody with a Russian name. Oh, yes, well, they're all oligarchs, they're all nasty guys, they're all gangsters, terrible, let's take their money. Yeah, that's what the Daily Express are talking about, like, and the man of the pub. Think about that. Think about it, and it's going through now. It's going through, this government is putting the levers in power to confiscate money from people who have a political difference, if you will. And that's assuming that Russians over here support the invasion of the Ukraine by Russia, which is not a given by any means. Who will they come for next? They've already got the levers of power to confiscate your money without the due process of law. This is a very bad thing, and they're getting it through now while everybody's heated up with rhetoric and emotion. Let's get rid of the emotion. Let's sit round a table before this gets any worse. Now, by all means, send blankets, send food and all the rest of it to the Ukraine. Okay, that's fine. It's a good thing. sending war material is only going to extend the war. If you have a house on fire, the worst thing you can do is try and put it out with diesel oil, all right? Let's calm it all down. Let's get round a table. And sending weapons of war into the Ukraine is not going to do that. Let's stop that. That's not good. That's not good. Let's get away from the nationalist rhetoric. These are the things we can do straight away. We negotiate a ceasefire by the weekend if we put all these things on the table and talked about them. And I noticed the stupidity of the leaders in the Great War back in 1914. Okay, there's a little collection of them all there on my wall there behind me. Let's get rid of these stupid people who seem to run our lives and run our countries all the time. And let's get round that table, okay? Before it gets any worse. So beware of that, and I will be tagging anything I do in the future with various sources and various channels so that you will know, well, I've been censored from this, but I've been censored, but you can find it somewhere else. So the whole thing can continue. And I think some of these new channels, which aren't owned by the establishment or influenced by the establishment, banks and big pharma and all the rest, you'll be able to follow the facts. And that doesn't mean fact checkers, of course, which are owned by the establishment. So I just thought I'd give you the heads up on that. And thank you for your sponsorship and your support. I thank you for it. Without you and the information that sometimes you people send me, I couldn't continue. Thank you again. As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research based. And I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I'll automatically share it with you. So surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.